Japan and the United States are known to have very different court practices when it comes to the topic of immigration. Today we compare the levels of independence that the United States Supreme Court has versus the Japanese High Court, and how that level of independence affects the ability to enforce immigration laws and practices. There are two significant immigration stories to compare and explain this issue. First, we have the Flores twins.
The Flores twins were two 15-year-olds who were from El Salvador who decided to move to the United States in order to help their family, who was suffering from extreme debt and famine and gang violence. They had to hire a coyote just to get to the United States, which is a long and perilous journey along with costing a lot of money. When they got to the United States, that would have to be the first thing they paid off, otherwise they would be hunted down and killed by this coyote. While eventually caught by U.S. border authorities, they were assigned a court hearing date and were expected to wait and be able to provide for their own food, water, and shelter until their court date came, which was several months in the future. Immigrants at this stage are not allowed to work in any capacity. When their court date finally arrived, they were unfortunately assigned a judge with a high rejection rate. Immigration judges are employees of the executive branch, meaning that these judges can be biased and have a 100% rejection rate. They had to be able to provide documents from El Salvador where they barely have a working fax machine or any high technology in order to prove who they were and if they were even citizens of El Salvador. If they were to be denied citizenship and had to go back to El Salvador, they would be murdered along with their family from the gangs that reside there, along with their coyote hunting them down for their debt money. However, they have to have solid evidence of this potential murder in order to be given asylum status, which is basically impossible to prove due to the failures in the Immigration and Nationality Act. This case shows the inability of the court system to rule on the unconstitutionality of immigration practices. The Supreme Court continually refuses to hear any cases on qualified immunity or immigration in general and shows the direct political manipulation of the Supreme Court.
Imagine yourself back at the age of 13. Do you think you could stand in front of a judge all alone and argue why you should be a citizen? That is what Utanin Wan had to do. Utanin was born in Japan. As a result, he spoke the language and immersed himself in Japanese culture. Yet he was never considered a legal citizen because his mother was an illegal immigrant, and Japan does not employ birthright citizenship. Because of Utanin and his mother's background, both of them had to surrender themselves to the authorities, which put Utanin on a difficult and lonely path. By the age of 16, 3 years into his immigration case, Utanin was forced to say goodbye to his mother, as she decided to leave the country for his benefit, as it would allow Utanin's case to be reevaluated with the hopes that he would be granted a special permission of residence. Ultimately, this seems to have failed, as 7 years have passed since Utanin's case has become known, and the Tokyo High Court seems to be in favor of upholding the original decision of deporting Utanin Wan. Overall, two questions arise from this case. Why are Japanese courts seemingly strict when it comes to immigration, and how do they compare to the United States? The first question can easily be answered by looking at the independence of the Japanese Supreme Court, and how they influence and perpetuate racial hegemony in the country. Japan's Supreme Court could be considered one of the most independent courts in the world, merely for the fact that each justice appoints their successor. The power of appointing their successor is a powerful tool for the court. They will always appoint a like-minded individual who will perpetuate the ideas and rulings that they support. It is also worth mentioning that these justices can only be removed from power through one method, that of a retention election, though no justice has seen a majority vote against them. Lastly, Japan's Supreme Court rarely finds legislation unconstitutional, especially legislation about immigration and foreigners. In fact, the Japanese Supreme Court has rulings that prevent foreigners, like the Zainichi Koreans, from attaining positions of political authority, because in the eyes of the court, even in name, they are not considered Japanese. This only reinforces the idea of jus sanguinis, meaning to be Japanese, one must have Japanese blood in their veins.
Independence of the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. has 9 judges that are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate, and this can be manipulated according to party, known as court packing. They serve a life tenure which can have both positive and negative aspects. The judges can be impeached through a lengthy process which is known to be extremely difficult and is vaguely described in the Constitution. They have a life term, which means it's rare for new ideas to be introduced into the court. The appeals court has its own jurisdiction, and courts often find legislation unconstitutional, meaning they aren't led by public opinion or politics. They can only rule on cases that are either in their jurisdiction or have worked their way up through the court system. There is also assistants who help screen these cases, which helps more cases to be heard, though they choose which cases to hear, and they are notoriously rejecting immigration cases.
The American view on immigration and facilitation issues tends to be mostly negative, despite the vast number of ethnicities currently residing in America. The Supreme Court refuses to hear cases on immigration issues, which is a major problem because of the lack of clarity in immigration law. U.S. presidents make strong statements about either opposing or supporting immigration, but usually do very little to encourage legislation. Legislators also can't get anything accomplished because of the massive gridlock within Congress. All of these create a stalemate in which change is unable to occur. No major changes have been made to immigration since the passage of the Hart-Keller Act in 1965. This legislation gave the Supreme Court some sort of authority to be able to make changes within the immigration system instead of the vague outline of rules they have previously had.